The first time I moved out of my parents' house, I was 25 years old, and this was a little over 10 years ago in September of 2014. And the place I moved into, it was about 15 miles away from where my parents lived and where I grew up, the house I grew up in. And I moved there because it was near my workplace. I had a job working for a supermarket as a delivery driver at that time. And the place that I moved into, it was a bit strange. It had a bit of an odd layout. So basically it was two rooms that were separate. They were both classed as the same flat. But one room at the front of the house, it was on the ground floor, had the bedroom and a small ensuite shower and toilet. And then you came out of that room and you walked a little way down the hall, only about 10 feet or so. And the other room was the living room / kitchen. And it was in an old building. And if I'm being perfectly honest, the place was a dump. It was like I said, in a very old building. It was very damp. It was very smelly. You know, there was a definite pong, ever present. Didn't matter how much Febreze I bought, couldn't seem to get rid of it. And of course, with the previously mentioned damp comes mould. And this place, it had mould. It had more mould than wallpaper, I think. Both the green kind and the dangerous black kind. So when I first moved in, the very first day I was there, after finishing work, because I worked at the supermarket, I called in after and I stocked up on bleach. Pretty much filled the basket up with bottles of bleach, spray bleach, bunch of different kinds. And I took it all back as I finished at 10 o'clock at night and got immediately straight to work on eliminating as much of the mould as I possibly could. And of course, within the week, it would return without fail. So a weekly mould scrub became a necessity while living in that place. The decor within this place was dated, shall we say. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. The walls were, in the living room, they were painted red, and it had this very old style kind of wallpaper as well that was peeling away from the very soggy walls. And if you just scratched it ever so slightly with your nail, it would come away. And the carpets in these two rooms were heavily stained. In fact, when I went to do the viewing before I moved in, the current tenants were keeping a motorcycle in the bedroom. So there was a big oil stain on the carpet, plus lots of other stains in there that, it's probably best to not try and imagine what those stains were. The flat was very cold. It had old Economy 7 style heating, which is rubbish. You know, it had one of those payment meters as well. It had like this little, it looked kind of like a USB stick, but it was just a little plastic stick. You had to take it to the shop and say, can I have so much credit on this, please? And they would put it on for you. You'd take it back and you'd plug it into the little meter and it would put the credit on there. And you would be able to turn the radiators on, which were useless, as I said. Basically, with Economy 7 heating, what you do is you switch them on, and then you have a red-hot radiator inside a freezing cold room. So not much use at all. The little portable fan heater that I had was much more effective at keeping me warm, but not very effective at keeping my wallet full. In fact, that was probably where the bulk of my spare cash went, because I had rent, I had bills, I had council tax, and I had to buy food, I had to put fuel in the car, and what little I had left for pleasure usually went on keeping warm. So I wasn't exactly king of the world at this point in my life. But despite all these problems, this place was mine. It was my flat. It was somewhere where I could call the shots, I could make the decisions. King of my own mouldy little castle, I guess. But why did I move out? Why was I so desperate to leave my mum and dad's house? Because I had a good relationship with my parents. You know, they'd always done everything that they could for me. They'd never, they hadn't kicked me out as soon as I turned 18 or anything like that. I was welcome to stay at my parents' for as long as I wanted to. So why was I so so deeply inclined to get out there and live on my own and do my own thing. Well, at that time, and before it as well, there was a big cultural push to move out and stand on your own 2 feet and, get out from underneath mummy and daddy's roof and find your own place and be an adult and grow up. Because if you were an adult and you still lived at home, you were considered a loser. Now, I don't know if that push is still there in the cultural zeitgeist, because as difficult as it was back then to move out and afford your own place, even to rent, these days it's 100 times harder. So I don't know if that push is even there, because what would be the point? Telling people who don't have a hope, young people who don't have a hope of moving out of their parents' house anytime soon, that they need to move out, otherwise they're losers. It would just be preaching to the choir. They know that they want to move out, but they just can't. Though having said all of this, I know that it's tempting when you're young to think that, just moving out and just getting your own place is going to solve all of your problems. It's like that with a lot of different things. It's, if I could just get my own place, that'd solve all my own problems. If I could just get a girlfriend, that would solve all my problems. If I could just get a job, that would solve all my problems. And is that true? No, not really. It solves some of your problems, but it creates a lot more new problems, ones that would never have even occurred to you before. And so in my case, when I first moved out for the very first time into this dingy, smelly little flat, I did have a sense of freedom, but there was also the sense of imprisonment, because I had to make the payments on the rent on this place. And because of that, I had to go to work. There was no, occasional sick day here and there anymore. That simply wasn't a possibility anymore, because if you didn't go to work, you didn't get paid. If you didn't get paid, you wouldn't be able to pay the rent. So, simple as that. But something that doesn't really... The gravity of that just doesn't really register with you while you're young and living at home with your parents. And so you find that you have to work full-time. There's no negotiating that. It has to be a full-time job that you have. And so you just end up in this cycle where you're working to afford this place that you live in, and you live in this place so that you can, like if it's closer to work like it was for me, you live in this place so that you can get to your job, and it just goes round and round like that. You need the job to have the place, you need the place to get to the job. And with money now being at the forefront of your mind all the time, that introduces a new kind of stress that you didn't have before. You may have felt stressed out about things before, you felt anxious about things, but this is a new kind of all-pervasive stress that will always be there no matter what. There's no getting away from it. It's not something that you can just take your mind off of by engaging in hobbies, because most hobbies cost money. And if you want to go for a drive to take your mind off things, fuel costs money. So every avenue of escape that you think you have it's suddenly been bricked off, and you are well and truly trapped. And this idea of freedom that you thought you were going to have, it's just not there. You find yourself realizing that you actually had a lot more freedom when you were living at home with your parents, or whoever you lived with before. So why the push to get people to move out of their parents' homes and get out on their own? Well, the thing is, if you're not living with your parents anymore, that means you're paying more money, and that makes you more of a valuable economic unit to the establishment. That's the only reason they did this. So this whole move out of your parents' house or you're a loser, it's a psyop. It's there to trap you into generating more wealth for the powers that be, basically. It's as simple as that. And everything you're told about how it grants you more freedom and more choice to do what you want, and the ability to live life on your own terms, it's all lies. It's all lies just to pry you out of your parents' house and get you into a situation where you're having to fork out or fork over most of the cash that you make from your job. It's pretty simple when you say it like that, and I'm not saying anything particularly profound there. This is all stuff that's been said long before I've said it just now. But yeah, that is pretty much the long and short of it. They just want you out on your own so that you're earning and paying, and that's it. It's all to your detriment. You're basically just cattle that's being used for whatever they deem is useful from you. And so when I was living in this flat and I was basically trapped, locked into a job and locked into this contract where I was having to pay rent monthly on this, below livable standard flat, I had very few outlets, very few escapes. I had an Xbox 360, but I didn't have the internet because I was kind of talked out of getting Wi-Fi by my mum, because she said, "Oh, you don't know how long you're going to be there, so don't take out a Wi-Fi contract." So I didn't. And I wish I did, because I was there in total for about 18 months or so, about a year and a half, so I could have really done with the internet. And yeah, being without the internet for quite a long time actually turned me into something of an internet addict once I'd left this flat and moved back home into my parents' house, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, what I had to entertain myself in the hours when I wasn't at work, because I worked 5 days a week, and the other 2 days a week I visited my family, which I enjoyed, but it meant that there was no day just for me. There was 5 work days and 2 days where I was visiting family, and yeah, it ended up being where I just had obligations, and that's all I had. And again, not that I minded, visiting my family and spending time with them. I liked to spend time with them, especially as I was only getting to see them once or twice a week at that point. But it was still, there was no time for just doing my own thing, which when you move out into your own place, that's what you think it's going to be all the time, just you doing your own thing. But it's not, but, I shouldn't be too upset about that. It meant that I did have family that cared about me and that wanted to spend time with me. I wanted to spend time with them. I was fortunate in that regard, I suppose. But at the time, it was a bit like, oh, God, I just can't do what I want to do. I've always got to be somewhere. But yeah, that's just what life was like that back then. But the few hours that I got were spent playing Diablo 3 a lot of the time on the Xbox 360. That was kind of my game of choice for that year and a half. I really loved playing Diablo 3. I'd never played 1 and 2, and I haven't played 4 since, but that game kind of got me through that time, because I didn't like the job that I was doing, and I didn't have any money to really go out and do anything that I wanted to do, and so I was confined to the flat pretty much when I wasn't at work or visiting family or anything. And so Diablo 3 became kind of it provided me some solace. And it's not like I could afford to go out and buy a bunch of games at any one time at that time, because I had no money left after rent, after bills, after fuel and food. So, and I think probably twice in the entire 18 months that I lived there, I had enough money to treat myself to ordering a pizza from Domino's. That was about the extent of my leisure time, really, was playing some Diablo on the Xbox. I ordered a pizza a couple of times, but all the food that I bought, it was always the cheap supermarket brand stuff. So I didn't really get much play. And I'm somebody who really likes to eat as well. I've said it before, I'm a fat cell. I like to eat, and I couldn't even do that back then. It was all the tasteless, dry, unpleasant supermarket brand food that I was having to buy to subsist on throughout that time. And that really, having left that flat again, like I said before, it turned me into something of an internet addict, being without it for such a long time. I had about 500 megabytes of data on my phone contract back then, so not nearly enough to really use the internet in any meaningful way. And food-wise, yeah, I went crazy on the food as well. Because when I left this flat, I went back to my parents' house. and I suddenly found myself with a lot more disposable income, and ironically, a lot more freedom. So, yeah, moral of the story. I've said it in a very long-winded and roundabout way. I do apologise for that. But moving out, it's not going to solve all your problems. You think it will. You think it's going to grant you freedom and the opportunity to live your life how you want to live it. Unless you have an extremely well-paying job, that's not going to be the case, I'm sorry to say. So if you are somebody, a young person who desperately wants to move out, just think about the fact that you will be losing a hell of a lot if you do that. So that's the only advice I can really offer on that front. But yeah, that's about it for this video. Thank you for watching. Thanks for making it to the end. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment, blah blah blah, all that YouTube jazz. I do appreciate having you here. Recently reached 17 subscribers, so that's cool. Let's try and reach the big 2-0. Maybe this video will get me a couple more subscribers. That'd be cool. But yeah, that's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one.